I froze as I read the message again. My brother's fiancée, along with her entire family, wanted to stay at my house for a week. At first, I thought it was a joke, a mix-up. But no, every word on that screen carried certainty. They assumed I would say yes. They didn't even ask. Seconds before opening the message, my morning had been normal. Coffee steaming on the counter, sunlight spilling through the blinds, the quiet hum of the city outside. I had plans, a week filled with small routines I cherished. Now everything felt off balance, as if the ground had shifted beneath me. I sank into my chair, staring at the screen. I wanted to text back immediately, to refuse politely, but my mind raced with doubt. What if they were offended? What if my brother was disappointed? I thought of him, my brother. Usually calm, fair, always the one who smoothed tensions. But he was away on a trip. That meant the storm would hit me directly. Alone. My phone buzzed. A call from her mother. I didn't pick up. Another. Her voice was sharp, pleading, insistent. "We're family," she said. "You can't just say no. It's not right." I shook my head, my stomach twisting. Family shouldn't feel like a demand. Family shouldn't make me afraid to set a boundary. I texted my brother anyway. "I don't think I can host them. My schedule is too full." His reply was short. "But it's family. Don't you think you should?" I swallowed, struggling to explain. "I want to spend time with them, just not here. I can suggest hotels, local attractions. I can help them enjoy the city. I just can't host them for a week." He paused. I imagined his frown. "All right," he said finally, "but maybe soften it. Don't make it sound like a rejection." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I sent the reply, polite, careful, thoughtful. I tried to give alternatives. I tried to be fair. Within an hour, the backlash came. Calls, texts, subtle jabs wrapped in polite words. "We thought family supported each other," one read. "So disappointing," said another. I wanted to scream, to explain, to make them understand that I wasn't refusing them as family, only refusing to disrupt my home and my life. That the words stuck in my throat. By evening, the house felt smaller. Shadows grew longer. The quiet that once comforted me now pressed against my ears. I felt isolated, caught in a storm I didn't ask for. Then came the message from my brother. "They're really upset. Maybe you should reconsider." I looked around my empty living room. The sunlight had faded. The house was silent. I felt a strange calm rise in me. I couldn't give in. I wouldn't give in. Not out of fear, not out of guilt. But yet I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. That a week, a message, a simple no had triggered something bigger. Something that would test my patience, my resolve, and my understanding of family. I clenched my fists, feeling a quiet determination. I wouldn't be pushed. I wouldn't be silenced. I would find a way to navigate this, not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth, with boundaries, with justice in the quiet, firm way that leaves no doubt. As I set my phone down, the last text appeared. A single line, sharp, simple, almost casual. "We can't believe you would say no. You'll regret this." I felt my heart skip a beat. My stomach tightened. Regret? Me? For standing my ground? The room went silent again. But this time the silence was loaded, waiting, watching, promising. I knew the story wasn't over, not by a long shot. And in that quiet, I felt the first spark of something new. A promise to myself. A promise that boundaries would be respected, that fairness would win, and that one day, truth would speak louder than anger. But for now, I sat in my chair, the phone beside me, and the storm of family expectations raging quietly, just out of reach. And I waited.
I sank into the couch, the weight of the day pressing down on me. My phone lay silent beside me, but the words from earlier still echoed. "You'll regret this." I closed my eyes, and the memories came flooding back. Years ago, life had been simpler. My brother and I shared everything. Saturday mornings were pancakes and laughter. Sunday afternoons meant long walks talking about nothing and everything. We weren't just siblings, we were a team. "Hey, promise me one thing," my brother had said that summer, years ago, tossing me the last pancake. "No matter what happens, we always back each other up, always." I had nodded, grinning, always, and we had meant it. But now that bond felt fragile, like glass stretched too thin. I remembered the first time she came into the picture, her fiancé. At first, I liked her. She was charming, polite, easy to talk to. We joked, shared stories, even cooked together once. But slowly, the little signs started to show, the subtle control, the expectation that everything revolved around her plans. I recalled a dinner party, months ago, when she had insisted on changing the seating arrangement at the last minute. "It'll be more comfortable," she said, smiling sweetly. But I remembered the tension, the quiet frustration in my brother's eyes. He had agreed immediately, never saying a word. I hadn't said anything either, but inside, a warning bell had rung. Something about her charm hid something sharper, something that didn't sit right with me. And then there was the message, the first real test, a casual request for a favor that turned into a demand. She needed help moving, and her family expected my home as a base. At first, I agreed out of politeness, thinking it would be a one-time thing. But it wasn't. Every request since then felt like an expectation. I thought of another night, just a few months ago. We had movie night planned, my brother and I. I had texted him to confirm. Her response came instantly. "Why not include everyone? Don't leave us out." My brother had sighed, apologizing, and I had reluctantly agreed. That night I realized my space was no longer mine, my time no longer fully mine. It wasn't just inconvenience. It was subtle, slow erosion of trust. The trust I had in my brother's judgment, the trust I had in the bond we once shared, the trust I had in the idea that family respected each other's boundaries. I sat back, staring at the ceiling, trying to breathe. I could feel the loss keenly. It wasn't about money or time. It was about respect, about recognition that I too had limits. Then a memory hit me like a punch. I had discovered an old photo album tucked away in the corner of the attic one evening while cleaning. Pictures of my brother and me as kids, laughing, building forts, celebrating birthdays. Every page told a story of closeness. And somewhere among those pictures, I saw her, not yet his fiancée, standing beside him with a smile, arms crossed, eyes calculating. Something in that image made my stomach tighten. I remembered asking him casually about it later. "Who's that in the corner of this photo?" "Oh, that's just someone from work," he had said, dismissively. "No big deal." But now I wondered, was it really no big deal? Or was that the first sign of the imbalance I hadn't noticed, the subtle shift that eventually led to her family assuming they could demand my space? My thoughts spiraled further. Every favor, every unexpected visit, every polite request that hit a sharper edge, they weren't accidents. They were part of a pattern, one I had ignored for too long, one my brother had never fully addressed. I felt a quiet fire rise in me. The betrayal wasn't about the house. It wasn't about a week of inconvenience. It was about recognition, about boundaries that had been ignored, promises that were quietly broken. And then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. A new message from her mother. But this one wasn't a complaint. It was a photo. A family gathering, recent, smiling faces, laughter frozen mid-moment. And there, subtly, I noticed something in the background. My brother, eyes downcast, not participating, almost invisible. I realized then he had been trying to protect me all along. He had said little because he was caught in the middle. He hadn't expected this week to explode into a battle over space and respect. And now seeing him there, distant, almost lost in the crowd, I understood the problem wasn't just her family. It was a system of expectations, unspoken pressures, and miscommunications stretching back years. And in that quiet moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't just defend my boundaries. I would understand the full picture. I would uncover what had been happening beneath the surface, quietly, without anger, without confrontation, and only then, perhaps, could I find a way forward. And set the phone down. My hands were steady now, heart racing but focused. Something had shifted. The betrayal was clearer. The past made sense. And with that clarity came the first spark of purpose. I didn't yet know how it would play out, but I knew one thing for sure. The story was far from over. And in that silence, I felt the first hint of revelation waiting, the discovery that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my brother, and the week that was about to unfold.
The morning light spilled across the kitchen table, soft and golden. I sat there with my coffee, staring at the empty chair across from me. The house felt different now, heavier, quieter, but somehow more mine. The chaos of yesterday had passed, but its lessons had settled into my bones. I took a deep breath and made a choice. I wouldn't react out of anger. I wouldn't lash out. I would act with purpose. Slowly, carefully, I would restore balance for myself and maybe for everyone else. The first step was small. I started reorganizing my schedule, carving out space for what mattered, and saying no where I needed to. Each refusal felt like a tiny victory. Each boundary I reinforced gave me strength. The tension in my shoulders eased slightly. My heart, once tight with anxiety, began to open to clarity. I remembered my brother's quiet struggles at family events, how he always tried to keep everyone happy, even at the cost of his own peace. I realized I didn't need to follow that path. I could act with fairness, without fear. I could uphold my values and still honor family. That afternoon, I began to plan. Not for revenge in the way movies show it, not tricks or public embarrassment. No, my approach would be subtle, clever, and moral. I would show them the truth through actions, not words. Respect would be the message. Boundaries would speak louder than arguments. I made a list of small steps, a polite suggestion for accommodations hereby, friendly guided tours of the city, quiet gestures that reminded me I was still part of the family, even if I wasn't surrendering my home. Every choice was deliberate, every move carefully measured. By evening, I felt a calm I hadn't known in weeks. The storm hadn't disappeared, but I had stopped being its victim. I had become its navigator. Then came the subtle signs, texts that shifted in tone. Her mother's voice on the phone no longer sharp, but cautious. Her fiancé, usually bubbly and commanding, now seemed hesitant, unsure. The first ripple of awareness had begun. I smiled faintly. They were beginning to realize that I wouldn't bend, that my no wasn't a weakness, but a boundary rooted in fairness and respect. And that realization, I knew, would make them pay attention. Later that night, I found myself in the living room, flipping through old family photos. One caught my eye, a candid shot of my brother and I laughing years ago at a summer barbecue. And in the corner, a glimpse of her, smiling but slightly apart. A reminder of how long I had tolerated subtle control without noticing it. I held the photo for a long moment. I understood now my strength wasn't just for me. It was for preserving the family bond in the right way, for restoring fairness where assumptions had created imbalance. The right kind of pushback could heal more than it hurt. A sudden knock at the door startled me. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't expecting anyone.
I opened it to find a small envelope slid under the frame. I picked it up carefully. Inside was a note, handwritten, brief. "I think you understand something we don't yet. Let's talk." I read it twice. A chill ran down my spine, but it wasn't fear. It was the spark of awareness. They had sensed the shift. The tide was turning. I looked around my home, familiar and comforting in its quiet light. My mind ran through possibilities. I didn't need confrontation to teach a lesson. I didn't need anger to restore respect. But I could act, carefully, purposefully, and morally. And soon they would understand, through their own eyes, not mine, that my boundaries weren't negotiable. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a surge of quiet triumph. The first step had been taken. The storm hadn't ended, but it had changed. I was no longer waiting to be hit by it. I was ready to guide it. And in the stillness, I realized something important. The next move wouldn't just reveal the truth to them. It would reveal my strength to myself. The envelope remained in my hand, the message clear, the path forward sharp. And the feeling that had begun as quiet resolve now became determination. A moral, clever plan was forming, and very soon the family would begin to see the consequences of assumptions, of entitlement, and of ignoring boundaries. The night stretched on, calm but charged. I placed the envelope carefully on the table and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere in that glow, the story was unfolding. I just had to wait, watch, and act when the moment was right. And then, just before sleep, I thought it. The week ahead wasn't just about hosting or refusing. It was about justice in its simplest form: fairness, respect, and clarity. And I would make sure it reached them quietly, inevitably, and wisely.
The front doorbell rang, sharp but calm, pulling me from the quiet hum of the evening. I opened it to find her standing there. My brother was somewhere in the background, waiting quietly. Her expression was careful, a mixture of frustration, guilt, and uncertainty. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. Not a demand, just a request. I nodded and stepped aside. "Sure, come in." We sat in the living room. The sunlight had faded completely, replaced by the warm glow of the lamps. Silence stretched between us for a moment, heavy but measured. I let her speak first. "I didn't realize... I didn't think you'd react like this," she said, voice low. "I thought family just does these things for each other." I leaned back, keeping my tone calm. "I understand that. But assuming something doesn't make it right. You didn't ask. You expected. That's the difference." Her eyes flicked down. I guess I thought it would be easy. Everyone says yes. And I didn't stop to think about what it meant for you." "You mean you didn't stop to consider me?" I corrected gently. "It's not about the favors or the visits. It's about respect, boundaries, trust." She nodded slowly, the tension in her shoulders softening. "I see that now. I really do. But I didn't know how to say it differently. Or maybe I didn't want to." I took a deep breath. It's not too late to do the right thing. To start acknowledging each other as equals, not just as family obligated to comply. That's what matters. She looked at me then, her expression shifting. Guilt was there, yes, but also realization. I've been selfish, and I didn't realize how much pressure I put on you. I thought it was normal. It felt like an invasion, not because I don't care. I do. I care about you, about him, about all of us. But care doesn't mean giving up your own peace. The room was quiet again. The kind of quiet that isn't awkward, it's reflective. I could feel the weight of years of small assumptions, unspoken demands, and misread intentions hanging in the air. She finally exhaled, and the change was subtle but clear.
I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't understand. I nodded, and now you do. That's why this matters more than any argument, any upset, or any expectation. Understanding each other is what keeps family strong. Her face softened further. I think I've been blind. And maybe I pushed my family too hard, too fast. I can see that now. I'm not looking for apologies. I just want honesty, respect, awareness. That's all it takes. She paused, absorbing my words. Then she looked directly at me. You didn't think you'd hold your ground like this. You really made me see things differently. I allowed myself a small smile. Sometimes quiet is louder than shouting. Sometimes calm is stronger than anger. I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity. A long pause settled between us. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. I think we can try again. Not just pretending, but really seeing each other. I want to make it right. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The confrontation wasn't about assumptions and expectations. Her expression shifted again, this time tinged with admiration. Not for me personally, but for the clarity and strength I had shown. I didn't know you had this much presence. I thought you'd just give in. I respect that. The emotional shift was subtle, yet undeniable. I felt it too. A release of tension, a lifting of a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. The storm hadn't ended completely, but its power had changed. It had become constructive, not destructive. She finally stood, a quiet acknowledgement in her eyes. Thank you. For showing me another way. For standing firm. Without hurting anyone. I stood as well. Boundaries aren't about hurting people. They're about fairness. That's all I wanted you to see. As she left, the door closing softly behind her, the room felt lighter. The confrontation had ended, yet the impact remained. Not anger, not resentment, but understanding, respect, balance. And I knew, with certainty, that the story wasn't over, but the next chapters would be different, stronger, fairer, rooted in truth. And somewhere in that quiet after the storm, I felt the first real sense of triumph, not over anyone, but over assumptions, over fear, over the imbalance that had existed for too long. This was more than a confrontation. It was a turning point, and everyone involved, including her, would feel it in the most powerful way possible.
The next morning, I sat by the window, sunlight pouring across the floor. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were alive. Yesterday's conversation replayed in my mind, each word lingering like a soft echo. I knew I had to uncover the full truth, not just assumptions, not just feelings, but the reason behind all the tension. I called my brother first. He arrived quickly, looking tired but calm. He poured himself a cup of coffee and we sat across from each other. I need to understand everything, I said. Not just what happened now, but all of it. Why they pushed so hard. Why it felt like control rather than request. He sighed, looking at his hands. I suppose it's time you knew. I should have said something earlier, but I didn't want to cause drama. I nodded, urging him silently to continue. It started long before the engagement, he said slowly. Her family? They've always had certain expectations. Not malicious, just rigid. They believe family always accommodates, always prioritizes them. And I thought it was harmless at first. I thought I could handle the pressure. And you didn't tell me? I asked carefully. I didn't want to upset you. I thought I could manage the pressure myself. I thought saying yes quietly would keep the peace. I leaned back, processing. So all the demands, the assumptions, the subtle pressure, It wasn't personal against me. It was fear, tradition, misunderstanding. They assumed family meant automatic acceptance, and I had interpreted it as disrespect. Why the week-long visit request? Why now? He hesitated. They were planning a celebration, something small for their parents' anniversary. They wanted everyone together. They didn't think about the impact on you. They thought I could convince you. I stared at him, surprised. No cruelty, no intention to hurt, just misplaced expectations. So it wasn't about me refusing, it was about them not knowing how to ask, I said quietly. Yes, he admitted. And yes, it hurt that you stood your ground. I should have prepared them better. I should have explained. I closed my eyes, letting the emotions settle. Shock had faded, frustration lingered, but it softened. I realized I had gained more than clarity. I had gained understanding. The betrayal wasn't personal. It was human. Then came another realization. I thought of her fiancé. She had tried to do the right thing in her way, even if clumsy. She hadn't wanted to hurt me. She had assumed, misunderstood, pressed where she didn't need to. The guilt and regret I had seen yesterday were genuine. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. All the tension, all the anger, all the assumptions were built on miscommunication and unspoken pressures. The storm had been unnecessary, but the lessons it carried were invaluable. I took a deep breath. Here was the choice I had to make. Revenge could feel satisfying, but it would be shallow and fleeting. I could let resentment linger, let the memory of tension define the relationship. Or I could choose something harder, something better, forgiveness and guidance, a quiet moral victory rather than a public triumph. I made my decisions slowly, deliberately. I would show them the power of boundaries, fairness, and respect. I would teach through example, not punishment. I would maintain my peace and invite understanding. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "Can we talk again? I want to make this right." I read it twice. My heart lifted, but I didn't respond immediately. I let the moment hang, a silent pause for reflection. She wanted reconciliation, but the choice to trust her, to forgive, and to teach the lesson gently rested entirely with me. I looked around my living room. Sunlight caught the corner of an old photo frame. A snapshot of my brother and I as kids. I smiled faintly. The bond was still there, resilient. The relationships hadn't been lost, only challenged. And now, with truth and understanding, they could grow stronger than before. Yet the quiet tension remained. The cliffhanger of human emotion, the choice, lingered in the air. Would I respond with immediate acceptance? Or would I let her reflect further, showing that respect and patience were part of the lesson? I didn't rush. I sat in calm, letting the warmth of clarity fill the room. The truth had been revealed, the mistakes understood, the lesson ready to unfold. And in that quiet moment, I realized the week ahead wasn't about hosting anyone. It was about healing, about fairness, about restoring trust without resentment. I didn't move my phone yet. The message sat there, waiting. My choice was poised, balanced, moral, and it would define not just the outcome of this family storm, but the strength of my own character. The decision wasn't easy. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful. And the story hung there, waiting for the next move, waiting for the quiet justice of understanding to play out.
The morning light was softer than usual, spilling through the blinds and painting warm stripes across the floor. My phone sat beside me, the message still unread. I had made my choice yesterday, The choice to respond not with anger, not with punishment, but with fairness, clarity, and calm. I typed slowly, carefully. My words were honest, gentle, and firm. I understand now. I see the misunderstanding, and I forgive it. Let's approach this as a family, with respect and awareness. I'm not saying no out of resentment, only to preserve balance. I hope you can understand. I hit send and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The tension that had been building for days, weeks even, began to dissipate. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, like the tide retreating to reveal a calmer shore. Later that afternoon, my brother joined me in the living room. He leaned back in his chair, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "Better than I ever could have." I shrugged, though I felt the truth in his words. It wasn't about handling them. It was about handling myself, keeping my boundaries, being honest, and letting them see the truth without anger. He nodded, thoughtful. "They'll remember this. You've shown them more respect than they realized, and they'll learn from it, quietly, in their own way." As the day went on, subtle shifts began to appear. Texts from her were careful, appreciative, reflective. My brother's fiancée sent a small gesture, a box of homemade cookies with a note. "Thank you for your patience and for showing me another way to be part of family. I hope we can start fresh." I held the note in my hands, smiling softly. The gesture spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. It wasn't about proving a point or claiming victory. It was about truth settling into understanding, about boundaries respected, and about quiet lessons learned. That evening, I stepped outside in the yard. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. I noticed the old swing set at the edge of the lawn, the one my brother and I had played on as kids. I pushed it gently, watching it sway, feeling a connection to the past. The swing moved slowly, in rhythm with the peace that had returned to the home. I thought of the years lost to assumptions and miscommunication, of the tension that had clouded simple joys. And yet I also thought of the future, a future where honesty and respect replaced silent resentments. I sat on the swing and let it rock gently. The motion was calming. I imagined her family learning the same lessons, seeing respect and patience, realizing that boundaries didn't mean rejection, and understanding that fairness and honesty create stronger bonds than blind expectation ever could. For the first time in days, I felt fully present. The storm had passed, not in a dramatic confrontation or dramatic gestures, but in quiet clarity, moral balance, and shared understanding. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, a habit I'd kept since childhood. I described the week, the conversations, the letters, the lessons learned. I wrote about boundaries, fairness, and the quiet power of standing firm without bitterness. I wrote about trust rebuilt and relationships renewed, slowly but surely. I closed the journal, feeling a deep sense of closure. There was no lingering anger, no desire for revenge. The lesson had been delivered, the understanding earned. The family bonds were intact, stronger in their honesty than they had been in years. Before bed, I placed the note from her fiancé in a small wooden box, along with a few photographs of my brother and I as kids. It was symbolic, a container of lessons, memories, and reconciled hearts. A reminder that growth often comes from patience and moral strength. As I stood by the window one last time, looking out at the quiet street, the city lights twinkling softly, I felt a calm certainty. Life had tested my resolve, my patience, and my honesty, and I emerged not just unbroken, but wiser, stronger, and at peace. I whispered to myself, softly, almost as if sharing it with the night. Boundaries respected, lessons learned, hearts healed. And in that moment, with the swing swaying gently in the yard and the soft glow of the city around me, I felt the story reach its quiet, perfect balance. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it simply breathes.
And in that quiet breathing, I knew everything had been set right.